Hello, Product Champs. Welcome back to Product Champs Studio, your go to destination for all things product. I'm Charity, and today I'll be talking about how designers can leverage AI tools with today's special guest, Payal Bhujwala. Um, Payal is a senior UX designer currently based in Chicago, USA, and she has an extensive history working with early stage startups and is currently working at IA Collaborative, which is a Chicago based innovation lab. And she'll be giving us a lot of insights on how she leverages different AI tools in her current workflow, what are some red flags to expect, and how to mitigate them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your product community. So, welcome to the show, Payal. How are you today?
Good, good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. I think it's a great pleasure. Thank you for accepting my request. Yeah, so we can get right into it. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? Yeah, all the juicy details.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I am currently based in Chicago, working at IA Collaborative. It's like a boutique design consultancy, and we do projects with startups, with more Fortune 500, Fortune 100
Mm-hmm.
companies as well. I'm currently working on a very interesting project with a major healthcare company that's at the intersection of AI and just usual technology and that side of
Oh,
things, which is pretty
yeah.
interesting. And we might possibly get into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a background in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved to the US about 5 years ago to pursue my master's here at Carnegie Mellon University.
Oh,
After
fantastic.
which I have freelanced for a bit, have been working at IA for about 3 years now, building digital products or working on projects that focus on digital transformation
Mm-hmm.
strategies for a lot of different companies. My
Mm-hmm.
role here involves, besides design, a lot of research, product strategy, and visual design as well.
That's fantastic. So tell me a little bit about how you said you have a background in software engineering. How did you end up pivoting into design, and how's that currently like manifesting in how you do your design? Like, what do you do differently from people that don't have a engineering background?
Yeah, I think I mean, while I don't actively like write lines of code, or
Yeah.
as a lot of engineers spend time finding like semicolons and missing
Mhm.
syntactical errors, I do work on a lot of projects with developers. So I think
Yeah.
that engineering mindset really guides my design process, where I think
Mhm.
about design decisions in a way, in a more logical and structured manner. So when
Mhm.
I'm sort of presenting my work to clients or like internal or external stakeholders, it's often derived by that logical and more systems
Mhm.
level thinking. And then
Mhm.
also keeping the feasibility in mind, because you don't want to design something that's not going to be feasible for clients to build, or it's not
Mhm.
something that possibly works out in like their dev timeline.
Mhm.
So I think that's one way that my engineering background has helped me. In terms of
Mhm.
how I got here, I was introduced to HCI in my undergrad.
Mhm.
Back then, it was just an elective, so it was in a very small capacity. But
Mhm.
I read a little bit more about it outside of the coursework, and
Mhm.
found the field very interesting. I also started to pursue front end web development courses then, because I
Mhm.
still wanted to keep like that engineering flavor to it. So
Mhm.
trying to maybe move towards UX engineering, which I didn't know that's what it was called then.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but focusing on that, and then I had considered way back before starting undergrad that I do want to go to
Mhm.
design school. So I thought,
Mhm.
you know, if there's a
Yeah.
design component to HCI, that would be interesting. And I
Mhm.
stumbled across UX design, did a couple of courses, and understood that I think
Mhm.
maybe I need to go to a grad school and get like
Mhm.
formal education and training in.
Mhm.
And that's how I decided to come to the US to do my
Ah,
graduate. here.
That's fantastic. So for your graduate program, you studied something to do with design, or what exactly you studied?
Yes, so my graduate degree was a master's in human computer interaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's from the Human Computer Interaction Institute
Mm-hmm.
at Carnegie Mellon. They've
Mm-hmm.
sort of been one of the first few programs that had started in the field of
Wow.
HCI. So it was really nice to get to be there, also be there in their 25th year,
Mm-hmm.
and get to meet so many other alums. So many. I still remember I met the Morris Knuth algorithms, Dr. Morris, and I was like,
Wow.
"Ooh, I did not know that he is a CMU alum
Mm-hmm.
and an HCII
Yeah.
alum, and I have studied his algorithms in engineering."
Wow.
So
Yeah.
um, that was, yeah, I think that was like one of my biggest memories of having, like, sharing like a breakfast
Yeah.
table with this
Mm-hmm.
person whose
Mm-hmm.
algorithms I've used.
Mm-hmm.
And just the community in general, I'm still close to a lot
Mm-hmm.
of my cohort from grad
Mm-hmm.
school. I also graduated in 2020, which was not the best time, very
Yeah.
similar to how the market
Of
is
course.
right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of really, stuck by each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an amazing experience.
Mm-hmm.
Went by too quickly, but I have very fond memories of it.
It's really interesting for me to hear like the path that you took and how, I mean, like that's helped you and it's given you all this perspective as you ventured into your design career. I think that's really good to know. um I wanted to ask you, going back to like talking about how designers that come in with an engineering perspective, they tend to do better. I know there's this whole debate, oh, designers should code, and there's this other fraction of designers that think no, designers don't need to code because there's front end developers. Designers who can code are front end developers. So like, what do you think of this debate? And I know you've mentioned like knowing how to like designing in a feasible way, designing something that's scalable, designing something that's implementable in the time frame that you have, like that's really important. I know people say like at the basic just know css, things like the box model, because this is something that you really will leverage when you're designing in Figma. So for designers that have come in fresh off a boot camp, for example, and now they're hearing, to stand out in this market, you need to, be able to communicate with the engineers and understand this engineering like concepts. Well, how would you advise that they go about learning these skills? Yeah, like if you were them, what would you do now to kind of bridge that gap, that knowledge gap?
Um, yeah, that's an interesting question, and I feel like I've always come across that question, like
Yeah.
even at like interviews and stuff like that. Like, why, like, is your
Mm,
engineering background sort of, or how does it help
yeah.
you bridge that gap? Um, I think it is. I wouldn't say it's necessary to understand code, but
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, like knowing about the box model, or
Mm-hmm.
and that's very specific to web apps and like
Mm-hmm.
websites and that level
Yeah.
of design. But for mobile, it'll be slightly different,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll and for sure you will not know everything, or have an understanding of all the tech stack that
Mm-hmm.
you would be working on potentially with
Yeah.
on projects. But I think just the idea of being able to, or the flexibility to grasp onto different concepts, I think that's another thing that I don't give my engineering background enough credit to, where you are almost in an autopilot mode throughout the program,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of like just throw a language at you, and
Mm-hmm.
and expect you to become like masters at it at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day or by the end of the
Yeah.
semester. So that sort of rigor, and that was something that I think I've still like imbibed. And also with my consulting experience, I think
Mm-hmm.
just, being thrown into the deep end and like
Yeah.
having to become or emerging victorious as that master of that
Mm-hmm.
domain,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important to like have to constantly, be able to learn new skills and
Mm-hmm.
innovate.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say so much as you need to know how to code or you need to know how to do this. I think it's more about the mindset. Like you just need to
Mm-hmm.
have an open mindset about being able to like quickly
Yeah.
grasp onto things. And
Mm-hmm.
so many, there are so many tools out there right now. Back in uh, then this is like 10 years ago, back when I started out, I think there was such limited like documentation in comparison to what exists right now. And there
Absolutely.
wasn't, you know, chat gpt or anything where I could just put in like, hey, like help me with this
Yeah.
problem or something and
Yeah.
get like a more like crowd-funded, crowdsourced opinion.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think my favorite or go-to platform, which I know still a lot of developers do use, was Stack Overflow, where
Mm-hmm.
it was like a more curated Google search
Yeah.
experience, the no programming
Mm-hmm.
information. But again, I feel like that's all very technical for
Mm-hmm.
designers or even researchers or like
Mm-hmm.
UX people who don't have technical understanding. So I would
Mm-hmm.
just encourage them to, you know, learn the basics and foundations of things,
Mm-hmm.
but then keep that open mindset that
Mm-hmm.
if in case you have to say work with an AI technology that requires you to say learn how to code for IBM Watson or things like that,
Mm-hmm.
like just have that open mindset. And
Yeah.
say if you need to, you know, build your own like chat gpt, which
Mm-hmm.
chat gpt is rolling out like algorithms and frameworks for, where you can build your own version of it, like
Yeah.
be more agile in terms of
Yeah.
learning those kind of tools and platforms.
Yeah, 100%. I think with everything, mindset is key, and that flexibility and malleability and the ability to just jump in and yeah, and learn on the go. So I think now it's interesting that you mentioned ChatGPT because AI and this has been a really hot topic lately, and I know you're working on something to do with AI, so we can get right into the topic. So from your understanding, how would you define artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I think, I mean, artificial intelligence has been around for so long. It's just
Yeah.
in the last like 10 to 15 years that it's gained so
Mm-hmm.
much traction. But essentially, the way that I understand it right now is it helps it helps to automate a lot of your routine tasks that
Mm-hmm.
earlier you would have to spend hours to, you know, parse through that much information and
Mm-hmm.
then use your cognitive energy to sort of um, generate like what does this mean, or
Mm-hmm.
what exactly you know, what is this trying to convey. I think
Mm-hmm.
artificial intelligence is helping you do some of those kind of tasks,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just at a very foundational level. I think
Mhm,
if like one of the earliest examples of AI was the Turing test,
mhm,
that or the Turing machine that was developed, which was
mhm,
able to run so many combinations that
mhm,
would not have been possible at a human
mhm,
speed, and would have
mhm,
taken what about close to 5 6 years more or longer for humans to be able to crack.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
things like that, where it's able to do a lot of these menial tasks at a
mhm,
much more and at an
mhm,
exponential level, and essentially
yeah,
increase our productivity as say designers or as like UX people,
mhm,
and then also increase or create a new avenue to solve problems for, because again, no technology is without problems to solve.
mhm,
So yeah, that's how I would see AI. And I think it's, yeah, it's a lot more of these things. It also involves so many like recommendation algorithms
mhm.
and systems, or designing for more of these autonomous systems and what that looks like. I think
Yeah,
that's how sort of it's evolved over time.
yeah. I think definitely, as you said, it's a thing that has a lot of history. It's a thing that's evolving with time. I think for most of us, we just tend to think of it as this black box that has like a bunch of data inside, and it does this magical things that we don't know. But it's interesting and it's important to understand the history of it, as you said, the evolution of AI, and just to kind of understand how AI is meant to help you. It's meant to be a complement of your workflow. So in essence, I'm really curious to know how you're currently integrating different AI tools into your day-to-day workflow as a designer.
Yeah, I think as a designer, and then also I feel like I'm also like a polylingual or a multilingual speaker. So
Yeah.
oftentimes I think it's very hard for me to like articulate my thoughts correctly, or even like on the go think of like, you know, micro copy or kind of what is the best way to say something. So that's definitely been my go-to use for AI right now, is just working on like a first draft of content and then kind of
Mhm.
using that as like a stepping stone and then iterating on it. Because again, I think as these tools are evolving, our human tendencies are also evolving of picking
Mhm.
up on whether this is, or does this, is this AI speak, or is this Payal who's talking. And
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and I think that that human intervention and that human touch is still necessary to a lot of these outcomes that we are getting.
Mhm.
um, I also rely on some of these AI tools to do like some kind of initial secondary research, because it does give you a little bit of a curated set of results than say like a
Mhm.
Google search or um, a Safari search would give you.
Mhm.
But then there's also risks of biases and stuff like that, which we can maybe get into later on.
Mhm.
Image generation or just image creation, again, being mindful of that this is just a foundational setup. And then there are other tools that I could use to manipulate these images that are
Mhm.
generated and sort of tweak them to the
Mhm.
kind of style or template that I'm trying to set. Or again, like
Mhm.
setting up some of these initial templates for workshops or ideation and things like that. I know
Mhm.
a lot of like workshopping platforms or tools have like AI integrations into them, so that they would just
Yeah.
generate like a workshop template for you. And
Mhm.
then you can
Mhm.
sort of, you know, pick and choose from there what
Yeah.
components you want to keep.
Mhm.
um, yeah, lots of different tools and platforms. I use for the image generation part. For the most of it, I do use Firefly. I feel like
Mhm.
Adobe has been ahead of the curve in terms of a lot
Mhm.
of their AI innovation. Like way
Mhm.
back from 2016, 2017, they've been using machine learning in a
Mhm.
lot of their like internal suite of products. If you see Photoshop, Illustrator, you have generative fill and things like that.
Mhm.
So that combination kind of gives you a very good starting point for someone who is not as strong as a visual designer.
Yeah.
I'm more strong on the systems thinking and UX side of things.
Mhm.
um, and then there's also Relume that I have used, which has been great for like doing again some of these menial tasks of figuring
Mhm.
out a site map and figuring out what
Mhm.
the architecture looks like. Like it does do a good job of
Mhm.
doing all of that initial groundwork, and then you can kind of go in and maybe, you know, tweak
Mhm.
certain things and change them to what your liking is.
I think the tools you mentioned, those are really fantastic tools. You could probably share your screen, and I know you had prepared a little demo. Um, you could share and show us kind of like how do you use it? What's the typical outcome, and how does that um, enhance your workflow or enhance the outcome or the outputs that you had been doing
Yeah.
before?
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, with Firefly, I think, or any AI tools, essentially, I do like to
Hmm.
check for whether does it meet the edge cases, or
Hmm.
does it, like, what is the most, you know, out there prompt that I could give it? And then also,
Hmm.
as an immigrant, you kind of think about, is this technology like catering to
Mm-hmm.
this demographic, or is it again based on like a very white cisgendered
Mm-hmm.
male persona? Because
Mm-hmm.
I still struggle with like
Mm-hmm.
voice assistants and having them understand my accent. And voice
Yeah.
assistants have been around for a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
But there are often times where Siri just does not understand what I'm saying. And
That's true.
um, it's yeah, it's still a struggle.
Mm.
But yeah, with tools like these, like I try to test out what's
Yeah.
the case or what does it see. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say for example, and this was something that we did very recently at work, was give
Mm-hmm.
AI tools like prompts about show me a
Mm-hmm.
doctor. And more often than not, there were certain tools that
Mm-hmm.
um, showed more male representation in doctors.
Mm-hmm.
So, alluding to some kind of gender bias that was baked in. And some of these things are because all of these tools are training on data that is out there
Mm-hmm.
versus Firefly. I think Firefly gives you like a good mix
Mm-hmm.
of tools, and that's
Mm-hmm.
evident of how long they have sort of been around and have been training their models and data on a good set of um, sort of base foundational training models, etc. um, Another one, if we would want to go for something a little bit more illustrative, is um, image of household celebrating Diwali. Like, I know Christmas would be standard to generate, but and again, maybe it knows what Diwali is, and it can figure that out, but I don't know yet. And then you, on the right hand panel, have like all of these different controls. So right now I think, okay, it's generating more like animated and not realistic
Mm-hmm.
images, but because the content type here is selected as art, but I can change that and make it photo, and see what it would sort of generate, and if it's like photorealistic or actual photos or stock imagery that it's pulling from and then creating like compositions out of it. But essentially, oh wow, okay, so yeah, this is quite an interesting mix. This cake looks a little
Mm-hmm.
weird, but other than that, I think it is somewhat sort of an accurate representation. And even though it's like an AI that's generating it, I would maybe make like small tweaks in these images to further use it, and obviously credit it to Adobe Firefly that I'm sourcing my images from here. But yeah, if you get the point in terms of like, I think it does a pretty good job of understanding what kind of image you're looking for, and then has like these more robust features um that allow you to sort of get that image. And then again, as I mentioned, you can download this and edit it in any of Adobe's other tools, or even within here, like use generative fill, so it's gonna change up the background and make it, give it a different flavor. Or yeah, let's actually do that. Let's use generative fill if you
Yeah,
want
it's
to.
fantastic. And you can just see how it already leapfrogs you past like a lot of like work that you'd have had to do. It gives you a single source for accreditation or crediting. How do you say that? Yeah, for
Yeah,
crediting,
yeah,
like you
it,
your source.
it it provides you with the source. So like, even if
Mhm.
I don't like the background that it generated, like I could just pick up this image and use it as is, and then kind of start there and make tweaks there. I think it
Yeah.
gives me like a good like foundational
Mhm.
um, background, essentially, to start off,
Mhm.
without having to earlier like find an AI generated person or find like a
Mhm.
random person, and then
Mhm.
add like this tree, or like add the flowers in the background and the like
Yeah.
things like that, like without having to make that composition on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I really like the style of it also. It doesn't look so obviously AI generated. And I know this is something as they continue to evolve, they'll get better at. But there's all
Mhm.
these, I think you've seen these pictures of AI generated images and everybody has six fingers or two toes, or it's just
Yeah.
really looking. So I like that this looks a little bit more natural.
Yeah, like
Mm.
even with this image, like you can see
Mm-hmm.
here, with just one lighthouse, there are so many
Yeah.
different things that you can do. You can add like snow
Mm-hmm.
around it, you can add
Yeah.
waves crashing, birds, you can change up the background and make it more realistic. So I
Yeah.
think they've um I'm that's not to say that this is like entirely a perfect tool,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's definitely one of the better options that's out there in
Mm-hmm.
terms of image generation. I think Dali I have also used back when it was free. um
Mm-hmm.
but that's another tool that I feel like it does a good job in terms of like more abstract and art
Mm-hmm.
esque images, but not so much as these kind of images. But as
Yeah.
you were saying, like it's that you might see six
Yeah.
toes or something like that,
Yeah, that's true. I think you mentioned something to do with like the ethics of AI, I think initially. And I'm curious to know like how can you pick the right tool based on like how are they sourcing the data that they're feeding into their AI. For example, um, how if I want to ensure that all the artists are properly credited, and I know this is a big issue right now. We have no solution for it right now, but like what do you think we can do to ensure we're at least making wise decisions in terms of
Yeah, I
accreditation
think
of original
I think
artists?
again, like that's an
Yeah.
ongoing challenge
Yeah.
and a problem. I know very recently Midjourney came under some fire where it
Mhm.
allegedly actually revealed a lot of the artists that it was, I wouldn't say
Yeah.
inspired by, but stealing their work
Mhm.
from,
Yeah.
or deriving work from. So yeah, there are all of these ethical
Mhm.
considerations that you essentially cannot work around. But I know there are like enough there's enough research and enough thought
Mhm.
being put into it. I know IBM has like
Yeah.
a robust guide on AI ethics and what that
Mhm.
looks like,
Mhm.
since they've been sort of doing that with Watson and
Yeah. For
their work
decades.
there.
Yeah.
um and then also just from like data and how they're using all of this data they're collecting, because it needs that information and it needs that
Mhm.
data to sort of learn and continue to get better at generating all of these. So that's another thing where enterprises, or I know a lot of times like we get asked as a
Mhm.
consultancy that if you're using AI, we don't want you to put any kind of information that is tied to us and our company
Mhm.
there, or
Mhm.
please disclose whatever AI tools you're using, or if you're using it to generate any company work with any company sensitive information. So
Mhm.
there are, with this prevalence of ChatGPT and all of these AI tools, there's this growing sort of fear
Mhm.
that, oh my god, like this is another thing of like how targeted ads work. Like this is again going to take more data and more information from us
Exactly.
to then serve us in the end of the day. But yeah,
Mhm.
at the cost of having to share all of that information. And
Exactly.
then, as I mentioned earlier, like there are all of these biases because it's
Mhm.
learning from people,
Mhm.
and people inherently have biases. So it's
Mhm.
it is natural for it to also inculcate
Mhm.
those kind of biases. And then
Mhm.
I think meant like, which is why a lot of times this human intervention is necessary.
Yeah.
So not just relying on the output or outcome you're getting from these AI tools and then delivering it as is. I feel like there
Yeah.
needs to be an assessment of this
Mm-hmm.
outcome that's generated. As I mentioned, like you use this as a foundational base and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of start to build from there.
Build
It
on
just
it. Yeah.
it really helps you with that um what is it, blank page like
Yeah.
syndrome or problem where you're not able to think too much when you have like a blank page in front of you. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
helping you get over that hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if it's baking in some of these biases in the beginning, then it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of gonna propagate through. So yeah, you need to there needs to be sort of like a checklist of sorts. I feel like that's something that's necessary, but
Yeah.
otherwise just more human intervention before we
Yeah.
actually release that kind of information out to the world or so, to someone
Yeah.
else.
I think that's actually a fantastic idea to have a checklist knowing, hey, these are some things you need to check for before you present this output to the end user, for example. If you're going to use AI generated imagery, check for this, check for ABC, make sure it's, following maybe a set of guidelines that your company or your client has prescribed. I think that's a really fantastic idea. Maybe we should do a template. Um, yeah, I think that's fantastic. I'm curious, and I know maybe you probably mentioned this while we were having the little like internet hiccup, but with your work currently that you're doing and the work that you did, I know with like early stage startups, and I know there was like probably a lot of discovery and research work. Are there tools, AI tools that could have helped your process, or are there any issues you faced that could have been bridged by particular AI tools?
Yeah, I think going back to like some of the startups that I was working with, again, like doing
Mm,
user research and
mm,
sort of generating like insights and summaries, I think
yeah.
that kind of process would have definitely been more like, or would have been sped up
Mm,
with like if there was an AI tool back then that I could, use
yeah.
to generate or get to that first level of insights maybe, and then again gut check that and see if that actually makes sense or if
Mm-hmm.
it's just giving me some random fact that's generated from out of thin air and not from the
Yeah.
data that I've provided.
Yeah.
So for sure, for those kind of things, image generation,
Mm-hmm.
especially like more abstract imagery, I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
as I mentioned, I'm not that strong on my visual
Mm-hmm.
side. So
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, if I'm facing like that blank canvas, I feel stuck or procrastinate because I also want it to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so then I kind of try to put it off. But now, since I have tools like these, like I can
Yeah.
use them as a starting point. Or I remember
Mm-hmm.
for a project earlier, like I had to design like a mascot of sorts
Mm-hmm.
and illustrate that. And I'm not a
Yeah.
good illustrator,
Yeah.
but yeah, like I tried with pen and paper and tried to create
Yeah.
something. It didn't turn out the way that it should have or I expected it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, had I like had access to like these kind of tools back then, I would have
Mm-hmm.
definitely gotten like a good starting point. Um,
Exactly.
for
Yeah, I think it definitely like it reduces a lot of that initial anxiety. I think with as designers, there's that feeling that everyone's looking at you. You're the designer, and you have to come up with this
it.
very polished, highly like perfect thing. So I do agree with you there with the fact that AI can reduce a lot of initial anxiety for you. It can help you come up with a good fast draft. So I'm curious how since you started using like different AI tools, how have you seen this improving or impacting how you collaborate with engineers, for example, or how you collaborate with PMs, etc.? How have AI tools improved you?
Yeah, I think there are certain like concepts or ideas that even if you did do a Google search, the
Mm,
definition would consist of a lot of technical jargon. So
mm,
understanding those kind of nuances, or I did not understand what an set theory was for like AI. And
Mm-hmm.
I went in and asked ChatGPT to explain this to
Mm-hmm.
me as if I am a 10-year-old, and it does a really
Yeah.
good job with like thinking about, the analogies for it, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what's important. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't think of a metaphor right off the top of your head. Like, you will have to really like hone in on that idea and concept a little bit more, but because it has
Yeah.
all of this like foundational knowledge and base like data,
Mm-hmm.
it's able to create that, um create that metaphor for me and make me
Mm-hmm.
understand a concept or idea that I would have previously would have to like jump
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of different hoops to get a
Mm-hmm.
sense of.
That's true. I can see that being particularly useful, like when dealing with engineers, and usually they have all these big engineering terms that most likely, as a designer, you may not be aware of. Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I think we've already discussed about like the UI. I know like it can help you leapfrog. There's specific tools. I think like there's UI Wizard now that can do entire mockups. And I think I've
Yeah,
used
and there are also plugins in Figma
in
itself,
Figma.
if
Yeah.
your tool of choice is Figma,
Mm-hmm.
um, where you can essentially like it has like all the components of a design system pre-fed in, and it'll
Mm-hmm.
create wireframes for you
Mm-hmm.
um, out of thin air, which
Mhm,
honestly, like, it saves you a lot of time because,
mhm,
again, like, you don't have to build out these components. You
mhm.
don't want to again and again design buttons.
Exactly.
So, um, so yeah, it does a lot of that standardizing and
Mhm,
like creates a skeleton of sorts,
mhm.
and then you can use that from there, and go ahead. And same with Relume that we had talked about earlier. Like, it helps you
Yeah,
with that base layer, base skeleton, and then you can
yeah,
tweak that and iterate on it as needed.
yeah. Probably we should do like a little demo of Relume, just to put this to like flesh out the concept in the mind of whoever's viewing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me share my screen.
yeah. I think I really love the design systems bit. I do not like creating variables and components and all those things.
Yeah,
So
exactly. You
like
don't you
having
don't
AI
have
to
to
come and do this helps.
constantly create buttons, and you've
Yeah.
already like figured out how to make auto layout work and created a standard looking button, but you don't want to
Yeah.
keep doing that. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
see. I was very impressed by Coco Golf yesterday. I was watching Australian Open, and we can maybe
I love
create.
Coco.
Yeah, it was a tough match with Marta Kostick, and yeah, she really gave her a run for her money. Um, let's see, create a sitemap for a website selling coconut water by Coco Coff. Let's do it that way.
Did you see when she won US Open and they had all the things, the t-shirts ready for sale? Immediately she won. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I don't know if it was her partner yesterday or her coach who was wearing that
Hmm.
cap, shake that cocoa, which is what made me think
Yeah.
about, oh, it would be interesting if Coco Golf
Yeah.
um is endorsing a coconut water brand. Anyhow, so it is, so for the home, wait a second, it's not generated it, so I'm gonna hit generate.
Could you zoom in a little bit?
Yes. So as you can see, it starts to generate like all of these different sections that would exist in this site on the home page, and it's giving each of them like a brief description about what it could look like. Now, what it's done is it's only generated like the pages, but it's not generated like content. So say for example, for product, let's say I wanted to generate like some kind of content for that. So what is it gonna do? It's gonna create all of these different sections that could be a part of like the product page essentially. And again, as I mentioned, it's going to give it that description. I think when I selected product, what got lost here was the fact that this is a website that there is a website of coconut water that's endorsed by Coco Golf. So that kind of got lost here, which is why like these descriptions, oh, it does have coconut water, but not does not allude to golf or has some information missing, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And then I think you can do that in the same way to generate like content for all of these different pages. But yeah, this gives you again like a good starting point about what a website for like to promote like coconut water could look like. And ideally, I would spend what, an hour maybe thinking about all of this and building this out in Figma, and then again creating components that fit. And here it's kind of giving me that that base template to work with, and I can like move stuff around or change like certain sections. Like I don't want to show a gallery, so I can just remove that. And yeah, it gives you a really good like starting point to sort of just play around with and make changes to.
Yeah, I think this is really fantastic. It's so robust, and I can see like for people that are consulting or doing freelance right now, like your clients can come to you already having done this, and it removes a lot of potential misalignment or miscommunication, because then they'll have, hey, I'm trying to build a website to sell coconut water and I want to have this and this page, and it should have, here's a high level, like together with the brief, this is what I want. And I can see it just speeding up the workflow for so many people.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Or even for I mean again, like if clients are not aware and they
mhm.
have this ask to
Yeah.
build out like a robust
Mhm.
site map, like you
Yeah.
can ask it
Mhm.
to, generate like all of these things, and it's gonna be
Mhm.
able to do that. But then again, there, even with the generation part of it, like the prompt that you're giving, I think there's a lot of like tinkering
Yeah.
that you need to do to get the kind of
Mhm.
content that you're looking for. it's
Mhm.
it's kind of
True.
like Google, where
There's a science.
yeah, you need to tweak your Google search a little bit again and again to get the pages that
Mhm.
you're looking for.
Yeah, that's true. I think eventually, because different people ask the same question differently.
Mhm.
So I think maybe with time, and I know like the thing with AI that's different from Google is it'll learn from how people ask questions. So yeah, I think within a few months or years, we should expect more robust responses, and that are closer to like the search term without you necessarily like having to type out this really lengthy. And I don't know if you've seen sometimes when people give you chat gpt prompts, and it's like a whole 6 paragraphs of,
Mhm.
hey chat gpt, please be my x and x mentor and do this and then do it this way. So it's like hyper specific. So maybe in the future we would need to be as specific, but yeah, 100% right now, to get the output that you need, you have to have that, um, the correct prompt. Yeah, and this brings me to the conversation about how do you think designers' roles will evolve now that we're having AI? And as we mentioned, our clients can jump in and do this on their own. And then they can be, hey, I don't need Charity. I don't need Payal anymore. So how do you think?
I,
Do you
I
think there are coming points?
mean,
What do you think?
yeah, that's like the golden question right now, right? Like the minute
Yeah,
you search up
yeah.
AI or is AI or will AI, like the next thing that
Mm.
Google autofills for you is all of these negative things. But
Yeah.
honestly, like I think like if companies are thinking that, oh, like AI can replace um a person or like their experiences and things like that, I think they're a little like delusional in terms of things like that, because
Yeah.
I think what AI is doing, it's just from existing information that it knows, it's
Mm-hmm.
generating this information for you. Um, it's not using creativity, or
Mm-hmm.
it's not using any of these learned experiences that humans tend to have, or
Mm-hmm.
it's not using certain things that you have picked up from with interactions with your clients, with other people,
Mm-hmm.
that it has no context about, and it's only using the things that are
Yeah.
out there in the open and like well sounded research or ideas for sure. But yeah, it's definitely lacking like that creativity and that more
Mm-hmm.
contextual information, which is why I said like
Mm-hmm.
any of these outputs that are generated do still need to go through this human intervention or a human touch, so that they are in a more consumable format, or they make more sense
Mm-hmm.
and are not AI speak essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And again, time and again, like there are so many biases and so many things that are baked
Yeah.
into these algorithms that you won't see that from a human perspective,
Yeah.
but you still see in all of these because they are learning from us, right? So some set of people who built these training models put in these biases, and that's why the output is
Mm-hmm.
generated like that. So yeah, I think each project, each brief that you're getting is very unique and very specific, that AI is not going to be able to give you that kind of specificity right now. Possibly in the
Yeah.
future, as your roles are evolving, it can give you that specificity, but then I think as designers you will have different problems to solve at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think AI and like human intervention would still be necessary. Going back to your point about the question that what are or how clients expectations are changing, well they expect a higher quality of output from you now, because they're like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is something that I can also create. Like what is
Yeah.
the value add of bringing in an expert onto this project? So higher level of like higher quality outcome, and also speed and efficiency, because these AI tools
Mm-hmm.
are equipping you to be able to generate more and increase your productivity. So
Mm-hmm.
then again, the turnaround time is also supposed to be lesser. But sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or what happens is, as designers, you tend to, if you're not familiar with tools and you don't know how to tinker it around to get to the output that you want, you tend to spend more time. So
Yeah.
I think
Mm-hmm.
as UX experts, I think just as and when these technologies are coming out, just get used to it and just start to use these tools,
Mm-hmm.
and get
Mm-hmm.
get a good understanding um, of how these work and how can you leverage them, so that you're kind of already ahead of the curve a little bit, and
Yeah.
are able to sort of increase your productivity and not
Yeah.
and yeah, stay true to client expectations.
Yeah, that's true. They say like if you can't beat them, join them, no? But then also at the same time, and I'm forgetting the point I wanted to say with regards to AI and design. I think it frees us up to do more problem solving. And I think, when we talk about being designers, we say we are problem solvers, but then now we are spending 90% of the time tinkering on design systems, or, you know, things that aren't necessarily, well, they are problem solving, but they aren't necessarily at like the level of depth of solving problems that we need, like creating experiences for users in like, or working with our clients in a form of like partnership and not a feature factory, for example. And this is something I've discussed um, in a previous video. So like it frees you up to be more of your client's thought partner, more do more research, talk to more customers. So I think ultimately I agree with you. It should be a thing that you add to your skill set as opposed to seeing it as something that replaces you in its entirety.
Yeah, I think it allows you to be more strategic and like drive that design strategy decisions. and think through more of that, side of things, where you kind of understand your client's business, or like even understand, like, if you're working in-house in a company, like understand the in-house business and what that looks like, and from your learned experiences can think about strategies that will give you AI is freeing you up more time from the menial tasks to think about more of these blue
Exactly.
sky and broader innovation tasks that need more human thinking.
Exactly. That's true. And I don't know about you, but I think that's for me as a designer, that's my happy place. I was like, and that brings us to the end of this amazing conversation with Payal. And I've learned so much. Thank you. This was really insightful, and I can't wait to start using Adobe Firefly and Relume. And thank you for joining me. I can't wait to have you back. And if you could tell us, where can people find you, plug any projects you have or anything you're doing?
Yeah. My you can see a lot of my work on my portfolio. It's always a work in progress, so feel free to stop by and keep stopping by to see more work being updated there at payalbhujwala.com. Or you can connect with me if you would want like to chat more about AI or just more about design in general. Or if you're based in Chicago, and I'm trying to grow my network of designers based in Chicago, so if you would like to connect, do hit me up on LinkedIn at Payal Bhujwala. And yeah, looking forward to making interesting connections. And thank you so much for having me, Charity. This was amazing.
You're welcome. And I'll attach all the links and profiles that you've mentioned down in the description. Thank you, and shout out to everyone that's got to this point for watching and sticking through to the end. Please do drop a comment and give the video a thumbs up. Thank you so much. Bye bye.